WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Comment. Janelle Nanos, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
So you are a business reporter at the Boston Globe, and we want to talk with you because you have a story about local celebrity chef Barbara Lynch. Lynch owns 7 restaurants in the area and has been accused of creating a toxic workplace. That includes lashing out at staff and guests, unwanted touching, and threats of violence. There's a lot to cover here, but perhaps the best place to start is where your story starts, with an event that transpired at Lynch's restaurant, Monton, in March. Tell us what happened there.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me and for letting me walk through what is a really kind of complicated story. So,
yes, it's messy.
It's a little messy. Yeah. Even for kitchen standards, right? What happened was that in January of this year, the executive chef, Ry Crofter, passed away somewhat unexpectedly, which really devastated the entire organization. A few months later, another chef who was really well regarded and well liked in the restaurant group also died unexpectedly. And in the interim time, Barbara Lynch, who was the leader of the organization, really didn't engage the team at all. You know, she went to his wake, but people sort of said that she wasn't really engaged there. There was a service that was held for him shortly after he died, which, you know, she was not in attendance at. There was just a general regard within the kitchen that she hadn't addressed the staff about his death. And then when the second person died, it became really problematic for folks. People were feeling as if they, you know, really kind of missed her leadership. On the events of March 15th, she came into the restaurant to address the staff after this other person had died. And people were, I guess, expecting her to provide some level of solace or, you know, help. And what ended up happening was that she lashed out in a way that people were really taken aback by. And she was intoxicated at the time. She got into an argument with a chef named Tim Deering, who was best friends with Ry Crofter. He engaged her and said, you know, you didn't come and talk to us. You haven't addressed the staff. Like, you know, I feel like that's disrespectful. I feel like you acted disrespectful at Ry's wake. And she was really combative and frankly said a lot of things that a lot of people thought were disrespectful to both Ry and the other chef who had passed away. She threatened violence. She threatened to put his head through a window. He told her he would drag her. Ultimately, you know, she told him to leave on the spot, and the rest of the team was offered an ultimatum, and most of the kitchen staff left shortly thereafter. And I think people were so upset with what took place at that time that they felt like they wanted to come forward because they had been witness to or victims of these type of altercations in the past, and they really didn't want it to happen again.
I hear all this and it sounds terrible, but I'm very curious to know just who Barbara Lynch is. Can you give us a little bit more context about who she is in the Boston restaurant scene?
Sure. Part of her story is that she came up from nothing. She lived in public housing in South Boston, you know, and talks in her memoir about growing up in and around when Whitey Bulger and Irish mob were really had their stronghold on Southeast. So she was not only witness to a lot of violence, but she actually, you know, suffered it herself. She talks about being a sexual assault victim in her memoir as well. Despite those hardships, she became a really well-established and well-regarded chef. 25 years ago this year, she opened Number 9 Park in the Beacon Hill, which was, you know, just a remarkable achievement. It was fine dining in a time when women were not really in the kitchen to the degree they are now. She talked in her memoir about wanting to create careers for people. You know, she didn't want people to come home with handfuls of dollar bills in their pockets. She wanted them to feel as if this was a career choice, that hospitality was a way that you can make a career, raise a family, buy a house, pay taxes, all of those things. And that's really what she was known for in the city was as she started to open more restaurants, they were not only innovative concepts that were new to the city, you know, they were making people into industry leaders themselves. Many of the people who worked under her have gone on to open restaurants in and around Boston. She was seen as a visionary, and she was awarded as such. She was only the second woman to receive the James Beard Award for chef.
Big deal.
Yeah, big deal.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back. What happened? I mean, it sounds like Lynch was some kind of visionary who was ahead of her time and wanted to empower her workers. How did we get here?
I think a lot of things happened. The time when Barbara Lynch was coming up in restaurants was still the kind of kitchen confidential time period. When you think of Anthony Bourdain's book, right? Where there was lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, lots of late nights and chaos. And in some ways, what she was doing was not different from any other chef at that time period. And one person I talked to said, in fact, the fact that she was doing it as a woman was kind of seen as a good thing, right? Because she could sort of hold her own with the boys. Clearly, a lot has changed in that time, right? And so we have things like the Me Too movement, first and foremost, right? Where people say they don't want to be in work environments where they feel like they're unsafe. And I think, at issue, and this is something that Barbara Lynch has talked about in her own memoirs, there has been a through line there where she has struggled with substance abuse, specifically with alcohol. And she's also struggled with clinical depression. And, I think that in many instances, people have said that her own levels of alcohol abuse have been what has created these somewhat toxic environments.
Tell us about some of the folks behind these accounts.
Sure. One woman who I spoke to, had been a manager at the Butcher Shop for several years and had grown very close with Barbara Lynch in that time. She saw Barbara Lynch as a leader and somebody that she wanted to emulate for her own career. And I think, she got somewhat disillusioned after working there and just seeing the way in which the chef would often be disrespectful and or inappropriate with her staff members. She mentioned a specific incident that for her was really the final straw, which was that she had been behind the bar at the Butcher Shop talking with a bartender. A guest table had put in, the appetizer order different, separately from their main course order, which frankly, I didn't know was that big of a problem, but apparently it's a very big deal for chefs, right? And she basically came out of the kitchen enraged and refused to make the food and grabbed this woman from behind the bar, basically, as she said, manhandled her in front of the guests and in front of her staff. And she just felt violated. And honestly, the violation piece of it didn't even really register with her until afterwards. She said she was so fixated on making Barbara Lynch okay, feeling, getting her to calm down, convincing her to cook the food, that she didn't even really think about it until later. It had she had just been grabbed by this person. And so she ended up leaving the company. She reported it to HR and she left. Unfortunately, a lot of people I talked to said that there were cases in which the idea that Barbara Lynch would put hands on somebody was somewhat expected. The idea that, if she came in to drink on an evening that she had been drinking herself. And, drink is the bar that she would often go to after taking friends or investors or other people to one of her restaurants, that there was sort of an understanding that they would do what they could to keep her from patrons, from other staff, so that she wouldn't put hands on people. People said that she had touched them inappropriately.
Janelle, even with all of that, there's a line in your story that reads, "They hope that coming forward will push Lynch to get the help she needs." When I read that, it seemed like to me that, the folks speaking out, they still care about her. They're not trying to destroy her or cancel her. You know what I mean? They just want some kind of accountability. Is that the vibe you picked up?
I think accountability is the exact right word.
Okay.
I think that's what it is. And I think, unfortunately, there's just been a lack of accountability for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's, particularly when you look at things like Me Too, I think that there is now just a sense that this has been allowed to fester and gone unchecked now for a long enough time that people are like, we just want somebody to step in and say stop. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the goal on the part of the people who came forward for my article.
Mm-hmm. Did we get a response from Lynch? What does she have to say about these allegations?
She denied them pretty wholeheartedly. I think that she sees the effort being made as a takedown, I think was the quote. She issued a statement that denied the allegations. I think she called them scurrilous at one point.
Mm-hmm. So last month, we talked about an incident where celebrity chef Ming Tsai was interviewed by Irene Lee of Mei Mei Dumplings, and he made this off-color joke about roofing drinks or something like that. And that sparked backlash. And now we're talking about Barbara Lynch. And, Ming Tsai is a man of color. Lynch is a woman. And these are two people who work in a restaurant industry that's dominated by white men. What do you think about that fact? That these last two incidents have been centered around these folks and not white men, who are the ones in power here,
No, I see that and I hear that in a big way. And I will say I've heard a lot of the same things you have in terms of people talking about open secrets in the industry. I think it's a small industry here in Boston. I think there's a lot of people who feel as if they want to stay doing what they're doing. They're concerned about coming forward. And I absolutely see that. But I also think that makes my job and your job a lot harder, frankly, right? I mean, as reporters, we can't report rumors.
Right.
We need people who are willing to come forward and talk to us about this. And so I'm listening. Yeah, I'm easy to find if you want to talk to me, is my point. I think that in both of those instances, there were instigating moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was the exchange between, Irene and Ming Tsai. There was this blow up in the kitchen at Monton. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just in the air because we're talking about it. But I do think there were things that allowed people to say, I've had enough. And so I don't know what that is for the other people who might be identified as problematic here in the city. I also think it's really important to just say that, these are really hard conversations to have.
They are.
It's, a lot of the people who I talked to for the Barbara Lynch story were really worried about the repercussions of talking out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't take that lightly as a journalist, and I don't think anybody should. I mean, I think, people were fearing for their own safety. But, I think that we're having this conversation now. It's certainly one I'm willing to continue to have with anybody who wants to reach out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, with that, Janelle, thank you for talking with us about this, because, this is one of those topics that's very near and dear to our hearts at The Commons. So we really appreciate you taking the time.
I really appreciate you guys having me on, and happy to come back as the story gets updated.
That's Boston Globe business enterprise reporter Janelle Nanos. If you want to hear more on this topic, you can join Janelle and Here and Now co-host Robin Young on Tuesday, May 16th at City Space. She'll be on the panel for a discussion about toxic restaurant culture and how it can change. You can get free tickets at wbur.org/events. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you have any thoughts on this episode or a story or account that you would like to share, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR-The-Common. You can also send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.